And alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu, all praises for Allah, we praise Him, wa nasta'inuhu, we ask His aid and assistance, wa nastaghfiruh, and we seek His forgiveness, wa na'udhu bihi min shururi anfusina, we seek His refuge from the evils of ourselves, wa min sayyi'ati a'malina, and from the bad outcomes and consequences of our sins. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu, whomever Allah tabarak wa ta'ala truly guides, then none can set astray, wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu, and whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets astray, then none else can guide. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. I testify that nothing has a right to be worshipped in truth as a deity other than Allah, and that He is alone in the right without any partner. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abdullahi wa rasuluh. And I furthermore testify that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, may Allah raise His mention and grant him peace, that he is the Abd and the Rasul of Allah, that he is the worshipful slave and the messenger of Allah. Amma ba'du, then as for what follows, then continuing where we left off yesterday, we gave at the end of our discussion, mentioning a number of definitions from the people of knowledge in the past who looked at the linguistic dynamics of wisdom and the components of wisdom and what wisdom is used in reference to in the Arabic language and in the Sharia, and how the entirety of Islam is wisdom. As Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, after mentioning in Surah Al-Isra, mathalan, for example, He, after mentioning the greatest commandments of Islam, the core tenets of Islam, from the worship of Allah and the rights of the parents and the main prohibitions, and the prohibition of killing one's children out of fear of poverty, to the end of what is mentioned in that tremendous passage, which is one of the most concise of passages of the Quran. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He said, ذَلِكَ مِمَّا أَوْحَى إِلَيْكَ رَبُّكَ مِنَ الْحِكْمَةِ. That is from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to you from al-hikmah, from the wisdom. The entirety of Islam, we said, is wisdom. And we gave a definition, the definition of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, and that is what we're going to discuss today, this morning, inshallah ta'ala. What was the definition of Ibn Qayyim? Al-hikmah, فعل الذي ينبغي على الوجه الذي ينبغي في الوقت الذي ينبغي, doing what should be done in the manner that it should be done at the time that it should be done. Doing what should be done in the manner that it should be done at the time that it should be done. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says in Madarij al-Salikin, in this section, that is probably the most concise thing that is written ever about wisdom in the history of Islam, that is based on what is in the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the statements from the scholars of tafsir, from the Salaf al-Salihin. He says, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him, al-hikmatu hikmatan, that there are two types of wisdom. Al-hikmatu hikmatan, there are two wisdoms, two types of wisdom. Ilmiyatun wa amaliyah, wisdom that is a reference to knowledge, and wisdom that is a reference to action. Wisdom in knowledge and wisdom in action. Wisdom in knowledge and wisdom in action. فَالْعِلْمِيَّةِ, what is meant by al-hikmatu al-ilmiyah is al-ittila' ala bawatin al-ashya'. Al-ittila' ala bawatin al-ashya'i. And to look upon, to look at bawatin al-ashya', as opposed to looking at the dhawahir of things. What is external on the outside, how things appear to be, looking at things from their bawatin, looking at the bawatin of things, the inner workings of things, the inner realities of things, looking at things not on a surface level, but looking at things in depth. Al-ittila' ala bawatin al-ashya' ومعرفة ارتباط الأسباب بمسبباتها خلقا وأمرا وقدرا وشرعا. He says, and it is to, upon looking at the realities of things, bawatin al-umur, and this is something that's phenomenal if you really think about it. A person, they may say, a very logical question, a very rational question to ask. That, we have مثلا in the statement of Umar radiallahu anhu. He said that when the Prophet ﷺ was alive, then يأتينا الوحي يخبرنا عما في قلوب الرجال. A revelation would come and tell us what was in the hearts of men. And it came to the Prophet ﷺ. What was in the hearts of men would come to the Prophet ﷺ. Allah would tell him what people were doing in private, what people were whispering about, what people were even thinking. I would expose people for the bad thoughts that they had about Allah and the Prophet ﷺ and the religion and that sort of thing. وَأَمَّا الْآنْ فَقَدْ انْقَطَعَ الْوَحْيِ وَإِنَّمَا نَحْكُمُ بِالظَّوَاهِرِ. And now revelation has stopped. Prophet ﷺ passed and revelation has stopped, and we can only judge based on what is zahir, what is obvious, what is on the outside. And so Islam tells us the inner dynamics of things. And the religion, it informs us about the inner workings of things that we would not know about, because we don't know now what is in the hearts of people and what people are doing in private. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to his Prophet, وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِعَدَائِكُمْ. Allah knows better about your enemies. And a person could be sitting next to their own worst enemy, breaking bread with them, being jovial and copacetic with them, and so on and so forth, and not knowing the reality of a person and the realities of how people are and that sort of thing, and any hidden matters is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the inner dynamics of the heart and the soul, for example, and what makes a soul lofty and righteous, what makes the heart salim, and what happens within the person, what occurs within the person, and what is the actual knowledge of the nafs, ilm nafs. You say ilm nafs in Arabic, what are you saying? Psychology, right? Psychology. And psychology today is behavioralism. That's what it is. And it's trying to apply scientific method to something that can't even be quantified and qualified. Something that scientific method can never apply to. And so it's just a guessing game for them. But ilm nafs is based on the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to know the inner workings of people, and if you want to know how you work, if you want to know what motivates people, if you want to know how to lead others and how to direct yourself and how to lead your family and all those sorts of things, and what is necessary to motivate people in the correct way, then you have no further to look than the book of Allah and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So wisdom is al-ittila' ala bawatin al-ashya' وَمَعْرِفَةُ إِرْتِبَاطِ الْأَسْبَابِ مَعَ مُسَبَّبَاتِهَا. It is to look at the inner workings of things, how things actually are. And to a large degree, the most important things, obviously, the most important things that are in existence are matters of legislation. And things that Allah has revealed, matters of belief, matters of law, and connected to how we earn our money, spend our money, all these sorts of things. Instead of looking at what is obvious and what is on the outside and what appears to the naked eye to be the case, then we have the outlook that is provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His book. And so we look at bawatin al-ashya, and all matters. We look at their inner workings, how things actually work. The best that we can decipher and determine based on the teachings of the religion and based upon astute observation and based upon al-mushawara, as we'll come to see, consulting with people of intelligence and wisdom and maturity and nusх and goodwill and so on and so forth. And he said, ma'rifatu irtibat al-asbab ma'a or bi musabbabatiha, and to have an awareness and a cognizance and a mindfulness of how causality works, how cause and effect works, so that a person takes the most praiseworthy means to the most sought after objectives, which is the good of this world and the next. So as that a person looks at the inner workings of things, how things actually work, as opposed to just looking at what is on the outside or looking at how things appear at the moment. And that they have a familiarity and an awareness of the connection of causality, of cause and effect. And there is no cause, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says in his book Al-Wahyain, speaking about a tawakkul, that there is no sabab fil wujud mustaqilun bit-ta'thir bi nafsihi, and that in and of itself has the ability to have any effect on anything else. except that it is connected to another cause and another cause and another cause, and ultimately all of those causes are set in motion by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is the controller of causality. He is musabbib al-asbab. He is the controller of causality, the one who makes everything happen. So when a person understands causality in Islam, he says, shar'an wa qadran, khalqan wa amran, which really means the same thing. Shar'an wa qadran, yani, as relates to what Allah has revealed, matters of belief and law and character and so on and so forth. And qadran, yani causality as relates the universe around us, how Allah has set the qadr into motion, what a person can observe. And fire burns, cold weather freezes, and causality, and this causes that generally. And this is what is called ada. And this is the natural course of things that a person is observant of how things are. And they know that what is outside of that is not outside of the realm of possibility, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not confined to the ada, and the normal course of things. And what is outside of the normal course of things is khariqun al-ada, and it is something miraculous, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can cause the miraculous to happen for any person, and Allah controls all matters subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this definition is very important, and that it is that a person has knowledge of this, and this is al-hikmatul ilmiyah. Hikmah as relates to knowledge, that they are mindful of, and that they look at the inner workings of things as opposed to just looking at things on a surface level. They're the Al-Wahyain, as we'll come to hear from the speech of some of the ulama. And that they look at and that they are familiar with causality, cause and effect, how means are connected to their ends. How means are connected to their ends. Now he explains this. He says, before that, he says, وَأَمَلَ عَمَلِيَّةً, and as for wisdom connected to action, and as we mentioned yesterday, some of the scholars of the Arabic language, like Al-Radad, Al-Asfahani, rahimahullah ta'ala, a number of others, Ibn Faris and others, they said that hikmah is a word that is used whether we're speaking about Allah or the creation. And it is a word that is used connected to action. Connected to action. Why an action is done. What drives the action, or what is the reason behind the action. What is the reason behind the action. And so, al-hikmatul amaliyah, he says, is quite simply putting things in their proper places. وَضُعُ الْأَشْيَاءِ فِي مَوَاضِعِهَا اللَّائِقَةِ بِهَا. Putting things in their proper places. Putting things in their proper places. وَلَمَّا كَانَتْ, he says, لَمَّا كَانَتْ الْأَشْيَاءُ لَهَا مَرَاتِبُ وَحُقُوقُ. Now he explains this in some detail. And as we go through this, then connect this to what we mentioned in the beginning. The definition of wisdom is doing what should be done, which as we said before requires knowledge, in the way that it should be done, which requires rifq and hilm, which requires being gentle with things, and being forbearing and having wise restraint and not becoming upset and angry and bored and all those sorts of things. At the time that it should be done, which requires al-ana at-ta'ani or at-tu'ada, and it requires a person taking their time and being deliberate, and taking their time and not hastening things, rushing things, and not procrastinating things. Tayyib, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, لَمَّا كَانَتِ الْأَشْيَاءُ لَهَا مَرَاتِبُ وَحُقُوقُ. Since all things have their varying levels, everything in existence has a martaba and have huquq, and they have their respective stations, meaning their rulings and their masari and mafasid, right? They have their rulings, and are those things permissible? Are they impermissible? Are they mandatory? Are they recommended? Are they disliked? So on and so forth, right? And those rulings are connected to masari and mafasid, and whether those things are good for people or bad for people, good for us in this world and the next, or bad for us in this world and the next. Everything has a martaba, and everything therefore has its huquq, has its rights, has its just deserves, what it requires, how it is required to be responded to and dealt with. Since all things, he said, first they have maratib and huquq, and they have their respective levels, and have their rights that are due to them. تقتضيها شرعا وقدرا, and that they demand and require religiously or as relates to the qadr, meaning as things are, as Allah has made things. He says, وَلَهَا حُدُودٌ وَنِهَايَاتٌ. Secondly, and everything has a head, has a boundary, and has its parameters and its limit. وَنِهَايَاتٌ, and its furthest extent. تَصِلُ إِلَيْهَا وَلَا تَتَعَدَّاهَا, and that it ultimately reaches, and its furthest extent, and that it does not go beyond, and that you cannot go beyond. Right? Everything has an extent, a limit that it is done to, and you cannot go beyond that limit. وَلَهَا أَوْقَاتٌ لَا تَتَقَدَّمُ عَنْهَا وَلَا تَتَأَخَّرُ. Thirdly, everything has a time that it happens. And it does not happen by the qadr before its time or after its time. It's going to happen exactly when it's going to happen. كانت الحكمة مراعاة هذه الجهات الثلاث. Then wisdom is being mindful of and safeguarding and being aware of these three matters, and these three directions, and the levels of things and their rights, the hudud and nihayat of things, the boundaries and parameters and limits of things, and their awqat, and their proper times. That is what wisdom is. بأن تعطى كل مرتبة حقها الذي أحقه الله سبحانه بشرعه وقدره. It is therefore, firstly, that everything be given and assigned its due status, be recognized with its due status and its haqq and its right that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has assigned to it, its rightful place that Allah has assigned to it, in His shara' and in His qadr, and in His religion and how He has made things in this world. Secondly, وَلَا تَتَعَدَّ بِهَا حَدَّهَا. And secondly, that a person does not go beyond the bounds. Going beyond the bounds is in either direction, either with ziyada or either with naqs, either with ifrat or either with tafrit. And he either doing too much or doing too little of the thing, and he going beyond the bounds of that thing, or falling short as relates to its rights, and he ifrat or tafrit, and he being extreme in a matter, or being negligent as relates to a matter, as relates to people and their rights and things and their rights and actions and their rights. He says, thirdly, وَلَا تَطْلُبْ تَعْجِيلَهَا عَنْ وَقْتِهَا فَتُخَالِفَ الْحِكْمَةِ. Thirdly, you are not to seek to hasten a thing before its proper time, lest that you oppose what is wise, lest that you oppose wisdom. وَلَا تُؤَخِرَهَا عَنْ فَتُفَوِّتَهَا. And you are not to delay it from its proper time. فَتُفَوِّتَهَا. Lest that you lose, and lest that you cause it to be lost. And lest that the opportunity be lost to act upon what you should have acted upon at the moment, and the opportunity will be lost. وَهَذَا حُكْمٌ عَامٌ. This, he says, is a general ruling. لِجَمِيعِ الْأَسْبَابِ مَعَ مُسَبَّبَاتِهَا شَرْعًا وَقَدْرًا. It's a general rule or principle that we can apply across the board with all means connected to the ends that they result in, and the cause and effect. All means and their ends. Shar'an wa qadran, whether we are speaking about what Allah revealed or what Allah has predestined to happen. فَإِذَاعَتُهَا تَعَطِيلٌ لِلْحِكْمَةِ. Neglecting the statuses and the rights of things and their just deserves is ta'atil lil-hikmah, and it is ta'atil lil-hikmah, and it is a person disavowing wisdom, it is a person's ignoring and denial of wisdom, and his ignoring wisdom and denying wisdom. He said, بِمَنْزِلَةِ إِضَاعَةِ الْبَذْرِ وَسَقِي الْأَرْضِ. He says, and this is similar, he gives some examples to help us understand. He says this will be like a person who was trying to plant a field or a crop or something of the sort, or plant anything, but they never sow the seed. But they never sow the seed, and they never water their crop, and they never water what they are growing. So that is the haqq of that thing. If you're trying to grow something, the haqq of that thing, what it requires for it to come into fruition is that you take those means. That you take those means. That you plant in fertile soil, and that you remove the weeds, and that you water the field, and you water the crop, and so on and so forth. وَتَعَدِّيَ الْحَقِّ. The second thing, and he going beyond the proper bounds, one direction or another. كَسَقِيهَا فَوْقَ حَاجَتِهَا. And he is like overwatering a plant. Like overwatering a plant, drowning a plant. Like drowning a plant or drowning a crop. بِحَيْثُ يَغْرِقُ الْبَذْرُ وَالزَّرْعُ وَيَفْسُدُ. In as much as that the plant and the seeds that you have sowed, that they drown and are destroyed. وَتَعْجِيلُهَا عَنْ وَقْتِهَا. And hastening it before its proper time. كَحَصَادِهِ قَبْلَ إِدْرَاكِهِ وَكَمَالِهِ. And he is like reaping the harvest before it is ripe, before it has fully grown. Before it has fully grown. And you could say in the other direction, delaying, if you just left it there. It's like if a person raised a sheep. And like the vegetarians today, they say, the cult of vegetarianism, they say that it's inhumane to eat meat and animals and so on and so forth. And so we should let them live to an old miserable age and die terrible deaths, right? And what do they want to happen there? And if you don't eat the sheep at a certain point, you're going to have a sheep that's awra, awja, is going to be limping, one eye is going to be beat up, it's going to be a mangy looking sheep, right? And it's going to die a painful death. And a person who doesn't reap the harvest, who just leaves the fruit, doesn't retrieve the fruit out of the tree and lets it fall and rot on the ground, or just leaves the crops without taking them out of the ground, so on and so forth, and those crops are going to go bad, and the manfa'a, the benefit of them and the utility of them, is going to be lost entirely. وَكَذَلِكَ تَرْكُ الْغِذَاءِ وَالشَّرَابِ وَالنِّبَاسِ. He said the same can be said about a person not eating and nourishing themselves with food, and then wondering why they're tired and sick and lethargic and so on and so forth. Or a person not drinking anything. Or a person not putting on clothes. A person not taking those simple means that are the basic means that if a person didn't do, if a person never ate, drank, if a grown, mature person needed another person to remind them to eat and drink and put on clothes, and you would say this person is probably somebody that the pen has been lifted from. Right? This person is probably somebody that the pen has been lifted from. And so he said that if a person doesn't eat, if he doesn't drink, if he doesn't put on clothing, he said إخلال بالحكمة, and this is his disacknowledgement of wisdom, and his ignoring of wisdom, and he is void of wisdom. وتعدي الحد المحتاج إليه خروج عنها أيضا. And if a person goes beyond the bounds in those things, and what they call aspirate, or a person, you can drink so much fluid that you can actually drown outside of water, right? You know, a person eats too much food and they become morbidly obese, right? You know, if a person, goes to extremes in their clothing, you see a person, he has, 6 layers of clothing on. You say this person is, out of his mind, right? The Salaf used to say about a person who would wear summer clothes in the winter, or winter clothes in the summer, that the person was taqiyya, that person was an obnoxious person that was even hard to look at, right? And a person who goes to extremes in their clothing, and who wears too much clothing, or goes to extreme in their clothing, you say that this person, who either doesn't put on clothing, and he goes beyond the bounds, that this is ikhlalun bil hikmah. وَتَعْجِيلُ ذَلِكَ قَبْلَ وَقْتِهِ إِخْلَالٌ بِهَا. Or if a person put on or ate something or drank something before its proper time, then you would say likewise, and that is a person's negligence of wisdom. As a person's negligence of wisdom. And you see a person who 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he goes and puts on his pajama thobe, and he kicks up his feet. And it's in the middle of the workday. You say, Akhi, go back to work. You have a family to take care of, right? And there's a time to put on your clothes. You see the person who comes out, to get the newspaper out of the driveway, the mailbox, but first he wants to put on his Eid thobe, right? He says it's not time to put on your Eid thobe yet, right? The Eid is still some months back, out. He said, and hastening something before its proper time is إخلال بالحكمة وتأخيرها عن وقته إخلال بها. Likewise, delaying it from its proper time, procrastinating something from its proper time is إخلال بها. And he is a person ignoring wisdom. فالحكمة إذن فعل ما ينبغي على الوجه الذي ينبغي في الوقت الذي ينبغي. This is the statement that we hear quoted a lot by the scholars. He built up to that statement with what you just heard. Now you have the details of it. It is doing what should be done in the manner and way that it should be done at the time that it should be done. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala أورث الحكمة آدم وبنيه. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, gave wisdom as a legacy to Adam and his children, to Adam and to all of mankind. He gave wisdom as a legacy, an inheritance, to be passed on by Adam to all of his children. فَالرَّجُلُ الْكَامِلُ مَنْ لَهُ إِرْثٌ كَامِلٌ. And the complete man, the ideal man, is a person who has his inheritance in full, gets his legacy and inheritance in full. He says, وَنِصْفُ الرَّجُلِ كَالْمَرْأَةِ لَهُ نِصْفُ مِيرَاثٍ. And the person who's half a man, who only has half of wisdom, he's like the woman who only gets half of an inheritance, half of the share of inheritance. He says, وَتَفَاوُتُ فِي ذَلِكَ لَا يُحْصِيهِ إِلَى اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى. And the levels in between having no wisdom or having half of wisdom and you're having full wisdom, and they are to such a degree that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fully knows the extent of the disparity of wisdom between one person and another. فَالْحِكْمَةُ إِذَنْ He says, وَأَكْمَلُ الْخَلْقِ فِي ذَلِكَ الرُّسُلُ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ وَسَلَامُهُ عَلَيْهِمْ. And the most complete people, the people who have reached the highest ideal in wisdom, were the messengers of Allah alayhim as-salatu wa-salam. وَأَكْمَلُهُمْ أُولُو الْعَزْمِ. And the most complete of all of the messengers in wisdom were ulul azm min ar-rusul. So if a person wants to learn about wisdom, let them read the stories of the prophets from the Quran. And if you want to find the benefits that are found in the stories of the prophets, then look at the book of Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Sa'di, Mathalan. It's probably the most concise book that you can find, and that is taken from his book Taysir al-Latif al-Mannan في خلاصة تفسير القرآن تيسير الكلام المنان. And it is the translation of the stories of the prophets, the translation of the benefits from the stories of the prophets. And it's something that was published by Sheikh Hassan Salman in Hikmah Publications. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him and the translator. And it contains within it the aqeedah benefits, the fiqh benefits, the character benefits that you get from reading the stories of the prophets. So it begins with Adam and it ends with Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It goes through the stories of the Quran, the stories of the Quran. And Sheikh Sa'di rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions, I want to say 33 or 44 benefits from the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. In the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, he wrote an entire book just about benefits from the story of Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. If a person wants to find the wisdom that Allah has given as a legacy to Adam and the children of Adam, then let him read the stories of the prophets and show interest and care for the benefits that are found therein and implement them in his life and in his dealings with others. He said, and so the most complete of them were ulul azm, and the possessors of tremendous determination and resolve, the 5 messengers of greatest determination and resolve. وَأَكْمَلُهُمْ مُحَمَّدٌ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ وَسَلَامُ عَلَيْهِ صَلَوَاتُ اللَّهِ وَسَلَامُ عَلَيْهِ. And the most perfect of them in wisdom from those 5 messengers was Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. وَلِهَذَا امْتَنَّ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى عَلَيْهِ وَعَلَى أُمَّتِهِ بِمَا آتَاهُ مِنَ الْحِكْمَةِ. And for this reason, Ibn al-Qayyim says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded him and his nation of the blessing that Allah has given to them as a tremendous favor. And the blessing of wisdom that Allah has given them as a tremendous favor. As he said, Tabarak wa ta'ala, in many places in the Quran. This verse here is in Surah An-Nisa, verse 113. وَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَعَلَّمَكَ مَا لَمْ تَكُنْ تَعْلَمُ. And that Allah revealed upon you the book and the wisdom, and He taught you what you do not formerly or priorly know. Likewise, the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, كَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا فِيكُمْ رَسُولًا مِنْكُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ آيَاتِنَا وَيُزَكِّيكُمْ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُعَلِّمُكُمْ مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ. Where's that verse? Baqarah. Where in Baqarah? Like about. Beginning, middle, or end? About the middle. About the middle. Right past the middle. Very good. What's the context? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that it is He subhanahu wa ta'ala, kama, what does ka mean? Tashbih, right? Just like, Allah says, Allah in His greatness sent to you, dispatched to you, rasulan minkum, a messenger from you, from yourselves. يَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ آيَاتِنَا وَيُزَكِّيكُمْ, to recite upon you Allah's verses and to purify and develop you and to teach you the book and the wisdom and to teach you مَا لَمْ تَكُونُوا تَعْلَمُونَ, what you do not priorly know, because they were in a state of jahiliyyah, what you do not priorly know. So what do you think this ka is a reference to? What comes after this? What's the verse after? فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ وَاشْكُرُوا لِي وَلَا تَكْفُرُونَ. Remember me and I will remember you. Be grateful to me and do not be ungrateful. So the scholars of Tafsir, they have 2 different statements. They say that this is from the bab of taqdeem and ta'khir, right? And you have putting things in a different order. So in that verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He said, and be grateful to me and do not be ungrateful to me. Be grateful to me and do not be ungrateful to me. Meaning, be grateful to me for my many favors. For my many favors. كَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا فِيكُمْ رَسُولًا مِنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ. And just as Allah has given you all the blessings of Islam. And just as Allah has revealed to you all of His shara'i, or just as Allah has given you rather all of the things of the dunya, the scholars, they say, the scholars of tafsir, some of them they said, just as Allah has given you the general favors of the dunya, then the greatest blessing was the blessing of the sending of the Prophet with the book and the wisdom. And some of them they say that the ka of tashbih there, just as we dispatched your messenger from yourself, is a reference to what came, the siyaq ma qabla, the context of what came before. What came before? What are those verses about that lead up to that? The changing of the qibla. The changing of the qibla. That just as Allah has transferred has made istikhlaf, He has given the legacy of the prophethood and the wisdom and so on and so forth, He has transferred it from Banu Israel and from the sons of Israel. Who was Israel? Yaqub, the sons of Yaqub, right? So all the prophets that came from the progeny of Yaqub, who was the son of Ishaq, right? That it was being transferred now to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his nation, who are all the people, for all times and places. And this is after Allah outlined His blessing and His favor and His covenant with the children of Israel for the first half of Baqarah, and outlined dozens of violations and how they violated the wisdom and the covenant that they had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He informed them that He had changed the qibla. And this is from the generality, the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon this ummah. And that the entirety of the religion is a blessing on that level. Is a blessing on that level. It is an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it is the transfer of favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the previous nations to this ummah Muhammadiyah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. May Allah grant salat and salam upon its Nabi. He says rahimahullah ta'ala, فَكُلُّ نِظَامِ الْوُجُودِ مُرْتَبِطٌ بِهَذِهِ الصِّفَةِ, that the entire order of existence, the entire world order, right? The entire order of the world, how things are structured, the entire nizam al-wujud, the entire world order and how the universe is organized, murtabitun bihadhihi sifa, is connected to this sifa, to this description of wisdom, of giving everything its martaba and its huquq, of doing that within its parameters and not going beyond the bounds or falling short of its rights, and doing everything at its proper time. Everything happens at its proper time. وَكُلُّ خَلَلٍ فِي الْوُجُودِ وَفِي الْعَبْدِ فَسَبَبُهُ الْإِخْلَالُ بِهَا. And everything that is wrong in this world, and everything that is wrong in existence, and everything that is wrong within the person, within the worshipper or the slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the cause of it is إِخْلَالٌ بِهَا. And is that he has ignored something of wisdom, that he has not implemented something of wisdom that he is missing. He has a deficiency in some aspect of wisdom. And every problem in existence, every sin and disobedience, every fitna, every chaos, every type of fawda, every type of oppression, every type of, you name it, that the cause of that quite simply could be said to be a lack of wisdom. And what is the word for a lack of wisdom? As-safa, foolishness. It is foolishness. It is foolishness. He says that the cause of it is إِخْلَالٌ بِهَا فَأَكْمَلُ النَّاسِ أَوْفَرُهُمْ نَصِيبًا وَأَنْقَصُهُمْ وَأَبْعَدُهُمْ عَنِ الْكَمَالِ أَقَلُّهُمْ مِنْهَا مِيرَاثًا. Until the most complete of people, the most perfect of people, those people who are closest to the ideal of what a person should aspire for, are those who have the vastest portion and the most readily available portion of wisdom, accessible to them and implementable by them. وَأَنْقَصُهُمْ وَأَبْعَدُهُمْ عَنِ الْكَمَالِ, and the most deficient of them and the furthest of them from the ideal, أَقَلُّهُمْ مِنْهَا مِيرَاثًا, are those who have the least portion of this legacy and inheritance of wisdom, that is the inheritance of the prophets and the messengers. That is why Fudail ibn Iyad, rahimahullah ta'ala, and when it was mentioned to him that there are many people who have knowledge that behave foolishly, and then they said to Fudail ibn Iyad, they said that al-ilm warathatul anbiya, or that the ulama rather are warathatul anbiya, and the ilm is mirathul anbiya. That knowledge is the legacy, the inheritance left behind by the prophets, and the scholars are the inheritors of the prophets. So why are there learned people who are foolish, learned people who are sinful and disobedient, or people who know better but they oppose the sunnah to the end of it? Fudail ibn Iyad, he explained what is meant in the hadith. He said, Al-hukama warathatul anbiya, the people of wisdom are the inheritors of the prophets. Because kamalul ilm al-hikmah, because the perfection and the ideal of knowledge, the necessary degree of knowledge is hikmah. And he is that which gives a person wisdom, so they put everything in its proper place. Ibn Qayyim says, وَنَهَا ثَلَاثَةُ أَرْكَانٍ. Therefore, we see that wisdom has three pillars. We have these three components, or these three aspects of the definition of wisdom. Therefore, wisdom has three pillars, and we mentioned them yesterday. Al-ilmu, and we mentioned them in the beginning of this talk. Al-ilmu wa madha? Al-hilmu wal ta'anni. Al-ilm, knowledge. Al-hilm, and coupled with hilm is al-rifq. and he is gentleness and forbearance. And at-ta'anni, al-ana, and he taking one's time, being deliberate, not being hasty. وَآفَاتُهَا وَأَضْدَادُهَا, and the things that plague one's wisdom. And there are the polar opposites of these aspects of wisdom are al-jahlu wal-tayshu wal-ajala. Al-jahl, ignorance. Wal-taysh, recklessness. And al-ajala, hastiness. The importance of hilm is what we're going to talk about for the remainder of our discussion here, inshallah ta'ala. And hilm is so important as it relates to knowledge, that the person who is halim, as we mentioned yesterday, that the person who is hakim is described as halim. And the person who has forbearance and wise restraint, that is the wise man. That is the wise man. And hilm is the foundation of al-hikmah, of wisdom. I want to share with you, after reading a couple of the statements of the Salaf as relates to al-hilm, there's so much we could give, so much benefit and hear so much benefit and read so much benefit about al-hilm. I want to share a couple of statements of the Salaf, and I want to, after mentioning the last of them, read the speech of Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala from his book A'lam al-Wahyain, talking about the levels of people as relates to al-ilm wal-hilm. Al-ilm wal-hilm. Because the third thing, al-ana, which is taking one's time, is implied by al-hilm, by having wise restraint and having forbearance. It means that you're not reckless, that you're taking your time. To the point that in the books of al-furuq al-lughawiyya, the difference between words, it's hard to find a solid definition that defines exactly the difference between al-hilm wal-ana, al-hilm wa ta'ani wa tu'ada. These words are near synonyms to each other. And you have forbearance and taking one's time with things. And so, al-ilm wal-hilm, al-ilm wal-hilm, the importance of having hilm with knowledge for every person, no matter who they are. From the statements of the Salaf in this regard is the statement of Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash. Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, إِنَّ أَهْلَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ لَمْ يَكُونُوا يُسَوِّدُونَ أَحَدًا لِشَجَاعَةٍ وَلَا لِسَخَاءٍ لَمْ يَكُونُوا يُسَوِّدُونَ أَحَدًا لِشَجَاعَةٍ وَلَا لِسَخَاءٍ. The people in the time of Jahiliyyah did not make anyone their leaders, meaning the Arab tribes. They did not appoint anybody to leadership due to courage or due to generosity. And that was not enough to be appointed the leader. And as we mentioned before, and in various lessons outside of course, the seminar, the ulama have written exhaustively, and we mentioned this yesterday, and the speech of Sheikh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, when he spoke about a matter of aqeedah that is found with Harb al-Karmani rahimahullah ta'ala in his book Ijma' al-Salaf al-I'tiqad, the consensus of the Salaf in Creed, which is the belief in the fadl of the Arab, and of the excellence and virtue of the Arab above all other nations that made them suitable to be the recipients of the message of Islam, that made them ready to lead the rest of the world. And there are a number of virtues connected that are necessary for knowledge and that are necessary for action, that are the components of wisdom. And they're very important to understand because we read about the Jahiliyyah of the Arab and so on and so forth, and they're painted as like some savage people in the bush or something like that, right? The Arab were very civilized, very advanced, but they were missing the most important thing on the face of the earth, which was at-tawheed. At-tawheed. And as a benefit, Al-Khattabi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentioned that Ibn Qutayba and others mentioned, and that some of the Salaf said that the reason that they had refined in the Hijaz their character to that level was their focus on the Hujjaj and their focus on the Bayt. Imaratul Masjid refines the character of a person, and it being responsible for the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Because as we know, the Arabs is the strongest view. The view of Ibn Qayyim, the view of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, and he proven by many of the statements of the Salaf and proven by the history of the Arabs that the first to bring the Awthan to the Jazirat al-Arab and to the Hijaz particularly was Amr ibn Uhayyad al-Khuzai, who lived about 250 years before the Prophet ﷺ at most. Because there are many of the Sahaba who are from the tribe of Khuza'a, and their ansab go back to him. So the Arabs, they preserve their ansab, they preserve their lineages, and they knew so-and-so was the son of so-and-so, the grandson of so-and-so, to the end of it, going back for hundreds of years. Ila yawmina hadha, people still know that, who their ancestors were, going back for hundreds of years, and perhaps even going back to the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And so Jahiliyyah did not exist within the Hijaz itself. They were in an enclave. They were isolated from the influences of the empires that surround them, because nobody wants to colonize the Hijaz. Looks like a parking lot, right? It's rough terrain. And so the Arabs, they were upon many aspects of character that are from the fitrah of the human being, and that are from the legacy left by Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam and Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam. From that is truthfulness. From that is fasaha, yani eloquence in speech, purity of language. From that is al-wafa, integrity, and abiding by one's word. From that is as-sakha. From that is ash-shaja'a. These two things are the core of manhood. As-sakha wa shaja'a. Generosity and courage. Generosity and courage. As the Prophet ﷺ said, in hadith in the Sunan of Abu Dawood, it's authentic, بِئْسَ مَا يَكُونُ فِي الْمَرْءِ. The worst qualities or traits that a man can have, is جُبْنٌ خَالِعٌ وَبُخْلٌ هَالِعٌ. Is to have unnerving cowardice or pained bukhl, any stinginess that is to such an extent that it hurts him to give when he does give. It's the worst qualities that a man can have. But listen to this statement. I'll take that in context. He said that those qualities weren't enough, which are the core qualities of manhood, outside of just having common sense and intelligence and experience and so on and so forth. He said, Abu Bakr ibn Ayyash, from the greatest Imams of the Salaf, he said that the people in Jahiliyyah لَمْ يَكُونُوا يُسَوِّدُونَ أَحَدًا لِشَجَاعَةٍ وَلَا لِسَخَاءٍ. I wasn't enough to be the leader, to have courage and to have generosity. He said, إِنَّمَا كَانُوا يُسَوِّدُونَ مَنْ إِذَا شُتِمَ حَلُمًا. إِذَا شُتِمَ حَلُمًا. They would only appoint to responsibility over the affairs of the people the person who was forbearing when he was insulted and abused. Who was forbearing when he was insulted and abused. Now, it doesn't mean a person has to be a coward, it doesn't mean that a person has to be soft. Bal bil-aks. And Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali rahimahullah ta'ala in Jami' al-Ulum al-Hikam, I believe in the hadith, La taghdab, do not become angry, and he mentioning the importance of al-afu, of pardoning people. He said that the Salaf, from the Sahaba and those after them, that they would love that a person, before pardoning a person and forgiving a person, adhar al-quwwa, show their strength. Show that person that if I wanted to, I could rough you up. If I wanted to, I could deal with you. If I wanted to, I don't have to let this go. I'm not letting this go. I'm not being forbearing out of weakness. Don't mistake my kindness for weakness. But that they would show the ability and the wherewithal to, and they get retribution for their self and to defend their own self, and then they would pardon the person. And then they would pardon the person. And this is, he says, in connection to the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he praised those who made intisar ba'da ma dhulimu, and who defended themselves after they were oppressed, who defended themselves after they had been oppressed. So this is praiseworthy. So a person can defend himself, he can stick up for himself, but he doesn't have to drag the person through the mud, right? Just let it be known Alhamdulillah, and this is the way that things should be dealt with. And it should be a sign of strength. The Muslims, they should practice wise restraint and do things with proportionality, that sort of thing. He said that they would only assign leadership to the person إِذَا شُتِمَ حَلُمَ, to the person who was wise in his restraint and forbearing when he was insulted. وَإِذَا سُئِلَ حَاجَةً قَضَاهَا أَوْ قَامَ مَعَهُمْ فِيهَا, and the person who, whenever he was asked to help the people, when he was asked by the people to help them with their needs, that he would fulfill their needs, or he would stand with them to make sure their needs were met. He would at least assist or vouch for them, or something of the sort. Some of the Salaf, like Umar bin Abdul Aziz and others, rahimahumullah ta'ala, have a tremendous statement. They say, مَا قُرِنَ شَيْءٌ إِلَى شَيْءٍ أَحْسَنُ مِنْ عِلْمٍ إِلَى حِلْمٍ, that there is nothing coupled with anything there is nothing that is coupled with anything that is more beautiful than forbearance and wise restraint that is coupled with knowledge. Forbearance and wise restraint that is coupled with knowledge. Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais rahimahullah ta'ala, along these lines likewise, who was from the greatest of the ulama, and he was a leader of his people, never appointed by any wali, by any governor of the lands of the Muslims. He was a natural born leader of his people. Al-Ahnaf ibn Qais, in the time of the Tabi'een, from the people of Iraq, he said, Uhlum tasud. Uhlum tasud. Have hilm and you will have siyada. And you will be the sayyid, you will be the natural leader by having forbearance. And this is very important. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, he says the person who orders the good and forbids the evil, then he must be knowledgeable of what he is commanding, knowledgeable of what he is forbidding. He must be halim فيما يأمر به حليم فيما ينهى عنه. He must be forbearing in that which he is commanding, and forbearing in that which he is forbidding. That which he is commanding, that which he is forbidding. He must be rafiq. He must be gentle in that which he is commanding, and gentle in that which he is forbearing, or gentle in that which he is prohibiting, rather. And so, these matters of wisdom, of knowledge, and forbearance, and gentleness, and so on and so forth, they apply across the board, and they are found in every matter of the religion. It is binding upon him, it's lazim for the person, and he has to coax his nafs, his self, his inner self, like you have to coax a child into doing things. Which is nicer than how he described it in another place in his Fatawa Sa'adiyya rahimahullah ta'ala. He has a lengthy discussion, an argument, mu'ataba, between the iman in your heart and your nafs that is ordering you with destructive behavior. But in this place he says, you have to have wisdom. It's not rebuke. You have to coax yourself. You have to convince yourself. You have to sit yourself down and talk to yourself like a little kid. Saying, are you really trying to destroy us? I promise you, he says. You should say to yourself, I promise you that I will give you everything that is mubah, permissible in this world, and that, so long as you give me the quwwah, so long as you allow me to have the strength and focus to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mathalan, he goes into a lot of detail about how a person has to, in a coaxing fashion, in a way that you would speak to a child. He said, you have to talk to your own self and have wisdom with your own self and come to terms in reality with your own self. This is where we conclude with this talk. Sa'ili Allah tabarak wa ta'ala tawfiq wa sadad wa hidayati wa sabir wa shah wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. We thank all those who came out and attended. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward our teachers, our asatidah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the administrators of this community and to return them back to a place of worship. It used to be a source of great joy to come to this community every time we would come. And it was very saddening. It's a trial and a test that requires patience and forbearance. And to take your time, alhamdulillah, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you something that is better. We hope that the next time you come to this community, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have blessed them with a place of worship, and the masajid are houses of light, houses of guidance, and houses where people learn wisdom and refine their character. As the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, لا يلني منكم أولو الأحلام والنهى ثم الذين يلونهم وإياكم وعيشات الأسواق. That those who stand behind me in the ranks in the prayer, he said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, are to be the people of ahlam and nu'a. Ahlam meaning hikmah. Ahlam is the plural of hilm, the people of hikmah, and the people of nuha, the people of aql, the people of intelligence, and self-restraint and control. Then those who are after them in knowledge and wisdom, and those who are less than them in knowledge and wisdom. وَإِيَّاكُمْ وَحَيْشَاتِ الْأَسْوَاقِ. And I warn you of any the lavat of the ashwaq, any of acting in the masjid like you act in the marketplaces. Some of the scholars, they mention, therefore, that the person, the Umar and masajid, the people who spend a lot of time and frequent the masajid, who are mulazimun in masajid, or the people of the masajid, and that they are, because of their time in the masjid, people who refine their character. People who refine their character. And there is nothing that is more important for us and for our children and for our families in a wholesome environment. And so we encourage everybody in conclusion to reach deep into your pockets and to spend until it hurts to spend. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
Okay. The name of that book, The Stories of the Prophets?
The Stories of the Prophets. By Hikmah Clubs. No, exactly. It's like beautiful something. Because there's a portion there. He's reprinting the book now. Our brother Raha, Ustad Raha, he's translated the rest of the book. Because the version that was translated just had the fawaid, just the benefits, but it didn't have the synopsis of the story of each prophet that was found in the original book, right? And so they're reprinting the book, a longer version of the book, inshallah ta'ala. But it's generally titled The Stories of the Prophets, like beneficial something to this, The Stories of the Prophets.
Sí, feliz.